Putting the Gemara back on the screen. Here we go. Okay, so if you have your Gemara, your article in front of you, we are 29a. If you look on the screen we're sharing now, we have the Gemara Mesechta Nida Ayin Gimel Amid Aleph. The very last two lines of the entire Shas says Tanat Ve'Eliyahu, says Eliyahu Hanavi, and we learned from the Beis Medrash Eliyahu Hanavi. Whoever learns halacha every day, he is assured of a portion in the world to come. As it states, the ways, whoever learns the ways of Hashem, the ways of the world are to him. There's several mamarim of the Rebbe, literally on these words, in different years. One common theme from these words of the importance of halacha, in addition to what the Arizal says, that says, Hariyu Hashem Kollel Eretz. Hariyu, the whole world sing to Hashem. Hariyu can mean several things. Hariyu can mean sing. Hariyu can mean shake up. The whole world shakes up. The words of halacha are able to change the entire world. They're able to make a person feel bittul. Idea of mizmor l'soida. Hariyu Hashem Kollel Eretz. What's a carbon toida? Let's give thanks to Hashem. Toida means to give thanks to someone. You have to really feel that you owe something to them, you appreciate them. And the more bittul, the more nullified and one you are with Hashem, the more you're able to feel a bittul, a oneness with Hashem. Haril Hashem Kollel Eretz, entire earth. The bittul is able to, a person makes himself feel like earth and able to bring it down all the way down to the lowest of the low. And the two explanations, Haril Hashem Kollel Eretz, that the entire world should blow trumpets to Hashem, or Haril Hashem Kollel Eretz, the world shakes in trembling and awe to Hashem. It's not a contradiction to each other, but they're just two different parts of the same explanation. The more bittul you are to Hashem, which is trembling, the more you're going to praise Hashem. You realize how little you are. And as we know, in Chassidus, it explains that halacha is ratzon of Hashem. Mitzvahs, and Torah. Torah is a chachma, the wisdom of Hashem. Mitzvahs in itself, we have different levels of tainug and ratzon. Mitzvahs are also what Hashem wants. When you do it, it's an action. But halacha, without the back and forth, which happens from klipa, you have just the pure halacha. Similar to Yerushalmi, where you had a greater godly light, and therefore in Gemara Yerushalmi, you don't have as much back and forth. It's more halacha. So 29a. 29a. So back to the Gemara, literally the same Gemara on the bottom of the page. Last line on the page, last word. You want to say Chav Ches Amud Beis, 28b. We are now discussing the same theme we had until now. We're talking about the greatness of a shul. Now we talked about the specialty of those who learn Torah, those who learn halacha. So now we're going to discuss going to a funeral of a Talmid Chacham, of a Torah scholar. And then we're going to go from there, continue on to discussing the specialty of the shuls outside of Eretz Yisrael, the shuls in Bavel. And especially we're going to talk about the Beis Medrash Shafa Yasif, the shul where the Shechina is in Bavel more than any other shul. Although the Shechina is in every house of worship and the Shechina is with us in Galus, but in certain places in outside of Eretz Yisrael, it is more open and more apparent. That is what we're going to discuss now. Anybody like with the 29a1. Tanrabanan, first word on the page. Mevatlan Talmud Torah Leitzah Sameis Ula. Good morning, Moshe. Thank you for joining, Moshe. Mr. Minsky. One is allowed to interrupt their study of Torah to accompany someone who passed away, a dead person, to their burial. Now we're going to be talking specifically about a Torah scholar, because you can't go to every single funeral, not possible. We're talking about specifically a Torah scholar in order to honor them. As we'll see clearly throughout the Gemara, we're not talking about getting a minion to the funeral. We're talking about getting many people to come to honor the person who passed away because they learned so much Torah. If there is no minion, you don't have 10 people at a levaya at a funeral, then you are allowed to stop learning Torah. You can interrupt your Torah learning to go to that funeral. It's considered to be a mes mitzvah.
Is he a Talmud Chacham?
Even if it's not any Jewish person, even not a Talmud Chacham.
Oh.
If they don't have a minion at the levaya, you're allowed to interrupt your learning in order to go to the levaya. But a regular, well, obviously, for sure, not going.
Okay, yeah. I wasn't sure. Thank you.
Right, yeah. So says the Gemara, Talmud Torah, you're allowed to interrupt your study of Torah, in order to escort the dead out for burial, and to escort a bride to go to her wedding. Amar Allah, Rabbi Yehuda bar Ilai, we had this Gemara before on similar Gemara on Daf Gimel. Rabbi Yehuda bar Ilai, you know Rabbi Yehuda bar Ilai? He's the most mentioned Tana sage in the entire Mishnah.
Stop mentioning Rabbi Yehuda is him, right?
Right. Whenever you mention Rabbi Yehuda, it's Rabbi Yehuda bar Ilai. He was born in Usha. He learned by Rabbi Akiva, and he learned by Tarfon and Rabbi Elazar ben Horkenes and Rabbi Ilai. His father was a Talmud of Rabbi Yehuda ben Horkenes. He was one of the 5 people, which when Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava gave smicha to 5 people, and the Romans killed him and pierced him with 300 lances, he was one of those 5 people who received smicha. So he lived during the time of Adrianus Caesar, Emperor Hadrian, tremendous persecution of the Jewish people. And he was forced to flee from place to place. Many of his statements of Rabbi Yehuda bar Ilai mention the hardships that they went through, or the Shasa Gzera times of persecution and decrees. It was always later on, even after Hadrian passed away and there was less persecution, still, he was always given tremendous respect, always allowed to speak first.
Hadrian had the first promised the Jews he would rebuild the Beis Hamikdash.
Correct.
And then he rescinded, eventually had the Bar Kokhba rebellion, and that failed out. But it was because actually of Hadrian's disrespectful attitude, to allowing the Jews to just practice their religion,
Correct. Yehuda bar Ilai, during his time, the Jewish people lived in tremendous poverty. He himself lived in even greater poverty than that. We learned previously that 6 students of Yehuda bar Ilai had to cover themselves with one robe, one talis, when learning Torah. But they were still tremendous Talmid Chacham, tremendous Torah scholars. At home, he had only one garment, one robe to wear outside. And him and his wife would take turns. He would learn at home Torah, and his wife would go shopping. And when he had to go to the Beis Medrash, his wife would stay home, and he would take the same robe. He was offered a salary, or offered a payment, come to Rosh Hashiva, have a lot of honor, and he refused. And he said, they came to his house, and in his house there was a small rug. He picked up the rug, and he said, "Look under this rug." And they looked, and under the rug there were a huge treasure trove of golden coins. And he says, if I want, I could become as rich as I want, but I don't want to. I want to only live with Torah.
That's like Rabbi Yehuda, like Rabbi Yisrael Salanter.
Exactly. All right, so he's buried in the north of Eretz Yisrael near Tzvas. So he is the most quoted person in the entire Mishnah. And he also quoted in the Maimer Basi Lagani, which says about Shtus to Kedusha. And we had this in Kunter Samayin, quoting him. He would run out whenever there was a wedding, and he would dance in front of the Kala with 3 hadassim, 3 myrtles, hadassim that you use in the lulav and esrog. He would dance in front of the Kala.
Rabbi Yehuda bar Ilai.
Yeah. Now this is, you have to, Rabbi Yehuda bar Ilai is someone serasim and asai, right? Someone, a colleague of Rav Shimon bar Yochai. Right? If you remember, the Rav Shimon bar Yochai condemned the Romans, Yehuda bar Ilai praised them, and so they honored him, and they and they wanted to kill Rishon Bar Yochai. He had to hide in a cave. Right, so Yehuda Bar Ilai, someone who's Teirasei Menasei, someone who's learning Torah constantly, 24/7, and didn't care much for any physical needs, and he would interrupt his Torah learning to go dance in front of a kala. And people call it a shtus. This is very foolish. Why is he dancing, making himself crazy in front of a kala? And when he passed away, there came a fire in the shape of a hadas, of a myrtle, and went on top of his aron, on top of his meat, on top of his bed, his beer, and it separated between him and the people. And people says, his foolishness was very good. That was a whole about second half of Kunter Semayin talking about shtusei l'saba, shtus of kedusha, folly of holiness. So Amar Alav Reb Yehuda ben Elai. They said about Reb Yehuda bar Elai, he would interrupt his Torah learning in order to accompany a funeral, to go to a dead havayis hames. This is now we're not talking about doing the tara. We're not talking about preparing the bed or the grave area. Yossi, manishma. Welcome. Yeah. We're happy to see you again. We missed you yesterday, but we're happy to see you again.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you. Me too. Thank you.
So we're talking about Hachnasas Kala, dancing in front of a Kala and a Chatan. And Yossi comes on. It should be a good sign. So he's talking about specifically to accompany a funeral, to walk along with the Aron, but not to prepare the needs of the burial. That you don't interrupt your Torah learning for. In what case was it said that you're allowed to interrupt your Torah learning in order to go to a funeral? If you don't have enough people to accompany the bed of the person who passed away and honor the deceased properly. If you have enough people at the Levaya without you, you don't have to interrupt your Torah learning in order to participate in the Levaya, in the funeral. What is considered to be enough people? So for a regular person, it's 10 people. A minyan, you have 10 people at the Levaya, that is sufficient. For a Talmid Chacham, which is a Torah scholar, now in this term of the Gemara, Talmid Chacham is not necessarily going to mean strictly a Torah scholar. It will mean more like a tzaddik. Tzaddik, and since he's a tzaddik, he also knows a lot of Torah as well. Because just a Talmid Chacham, like we learned before earlier, someone who learned Mishnayos, so you don't have a city in the world, a Jewish city at least, with a sizable population where you don't have many people learn Mishnayos. It's not really possible to keep on interrupting your Torah study for every single funeral, for every single wedding. Go to a large city, you have this past Shabbos in Karnaites, I was told, there were, I think, 48 Chasanim who were called up Pugan Aliyah, this offer of the Shabbos. Yeah. Then the Rebbe's room and the oil, and downstairs in 770, and several minyanim, I think Shachris, Mincha, I think 48 Chasanim. Right? So it's not really possible to go to every, and it means people getting married this week. Some getting married outside of New York, but it's not really possible to go to every wedding and every funeral in a larger city.
And here in Pittsburgh, if she connected her, she would have some space in between them.
And even more than that, we're going to see in the Gemara shortly. It means you have to go walk with them all the way to the cemetery. Over here, most funerals, most cities, you go to the shul, and everyone goes to the shul, and you walk with them 4 amas. You walk with them a few steps and you accompany them, in front of the shul or the funeral home, and to the cemetery, much less people go. And we're going to see you have to accompany them until the cemetery. So why don't we do this today? We'll get to this after we learn the Gemara. How much is enough people at a funeral? How much do you think?
I mean, a funeral,
sufficient. What's sufficient people at a funeral of a Torah scholar, of a Talmid Chacham?
Is she for a Talmid Chacham?
Correct. Because a regular person who's not a Talmid Chacham is only a minyan. That's sufficient. If there's no minyan, you're able to go to there.
Did they give big honor, like let's say the funeral for Moshe Feinstein?
Correct. The funeral of Moshe Feinstein.
Thousands, right?
Right. Or have the funeral of a Rosh Yeshiva or a big Torah scholar. It says the Gemara, how much is enough people at a funeral? Common culture, okay? Omer Shmuel bar Inya, Mishmei de Rav. There's Shmuel bar Inya. Is that the name of Rav? Treiser alfe gavra, v'shiti alfe shipura. You need 18,000 people at a funeral to have sufficient people. 12,000 to march in the procession, and another 6,000 in order to blow their horns, to blow trumpets as a sign of mourning. That's how many people you need for Levaya. So if you don't have 18,000 people yet, and it's a Torah scholar, you could interrupt your Torah learning in order to go to the Levaya.
And maybe you could also actually free your Eved, Kanani said.
Well, if he doesn't have the obligation to learn Torah, he could go to the funeral. He's not interrupting his Torah learning. Right? He's not obligated to learn Torah. There's no need to free him for this. What's the reason you need so many people for Levaya? 18,000 people, 6,000 people announcing, trumpets announcing, everybody, hear ye, come to this Levaya. In Yerushalayim, you have a car that goes around and announces a Levaya. Right? You have all hours of the day and night, cars going around. Everyone come to the Levaya. You'll have one or two cars. You don't need 12,000 people, 6,000 people. So the Marsha says, because the Satan cannot accuse if you're 12,000, the Jewish people with 12,000 people, if you have 12,000. In addition to that, it says that when the Torah was given, Rechev Elikim, Ribesayim Alfe Shinon Bam Sinai B'Kodesh. Let's bring it up on the screen just for context. Chapter 68. It's one of the longer capitals in Tehillim, but verse 18, Rechev Elikim, Hashem's chariot is how many people? Ribasayim, 2 times 10,000, which is 20,000. Alfe Shinon of thousands of angels. Hashem Vam Sinai B'Kodesh. Hashem was among them at Mount Sinai in holiness, giving of the Torah. So when Torah was given, it says that Hashem's chariot was with 20,000 people, and Shinan means angels, but Shinan also means shoina, the one who learns halachas or teach halachas. So for someone who teaches, it says in Gemara Veyodaata, say Shinan. Gemara says you read it she'enan. They're missing 2,000 angels. There were 18,000 angels, meaning there are 20,000 minus 2,000. There are 18,000 angels by Har Sinai. And by Har Sinai, if you remember what the Torah says, all the people saw the koilis, the sounds, lapidim, the fire, koil shofar, and the voice of the shofar. So you have 18,000 angels at the giving of the Torah, and the Jewish people saw 3 different things: the sounds, the fire, and the sound of the shofar. So 1/3 of the angels, 6,000 angels, were making noise, which 6,000 were with a fire, and 6,000 were with a shofar. Therefore, by a Torah scholar is the same thing as Har Sinai. A Torah scholar is called Sinai. You need 18,000 people, 6,000 blowing a shofar, which means announcing about the person who passed away, and another 6,000 and 6,000, 12,000, which are the fire and the sounds, the thunder and lightning, meaning to give a voice to the entire. You need 12,000 plus 6,000, altogether 18,000, the same as the angels of Matan Torah. So that's one of the reasons why the Gemara didn't just choose a random number, 18,000. Why 18,000 people at a funeral? So everything has a specific number. Continues the Gemara. So how many people do you need to come to a Torah funeral of a Talmid Chacham? How many was it?
18,000.
18,000. Hold your horses, or hold your trumpets, rather. Some people say we need more. The Amrilei, and another version in the name of, there was Shmuel Bar Inya in the name of Rav, says, Treiser Alpei Gavre. Uminayu Shita Alpha Shipurei. You only need 12,000 people at this funeral, 6,000 to accompany, and 6,000 to make announcements and to blow the trumpets. Ula Amar. Ula says, what does it mean to have enough, sufficient people at a levaya, funeral of a Torah scholar? Kigoin, for example, that there's so many people at this funeral, the chaitzi gavre me'abula ad sichra. That, now, remember when Baba Connor passed away, the procession of cars was a mile long. That's how many cars there were in the procession. Bob O'Connor, he passed, the mayor of Pittsburgh, the Pelled's brother-in-law. It says when the Queen Mother passed away, it was a few miles long. A procession. Here, the procession has to go, he says, until the amount of people, it will be full from a place called Abula. This is a city where Ula was then, at the time, until Sichra, which is a place outside of the city, where the cemetery was. So it has to be so many people that it's able to, you have to have a funeral procession going all the way from the city all the way till outside the city. So every city would have a different amount. Usually the cemeteries were close by in the city. Right over here, to have a cemetery here in Churchill, for many places, that'll be much further than the cemetery was from the towns back then, because it'll be a half a day of travel to get there. You couldn't just go in your car and get there in 20 minutes. So the cemetery is usually right outside of the city proper, and so has to be long enough that the procession has to go from the place of the Beis Medrash all the way to the cemetery. How many people it is, he doesn't say exactly, but that's the amount of people that you need. Which means that there's so many people that when the first ones come to the cemetery, it comes to the burial place, the last ones still have never left the shul yet. It also means it was a procession, everyone walked in a orderly fashion, in a line, otherwise everyone just goes on their own pace. Rav Shesha says, you need more people at a funeral of a Torah scholar. Kinisinasa kach netilasa. When the same way the Torah was given is the same way the Torah is taken away. Just like the Torah was given with 600,000 men and people, so too when you have a funeral of a Torah scholar, you also have to have 600,000 people, because when the Torah scholar dies, when he passes away, all that Torah which he taught is now no longer going to be able to be taught anymore. And therefore, you need the same exact amount of people, which is as Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah, 600,000. Manasinasa b'shishim ribay. Af nitilasa b'shishim ribay. Just like when the Torah was given, you had 600,000 people by Har Sinai to receive the Torah. So too, when the Torah was taken away, when you have a levaya, funeral of a Torah scholar, you also need to have 600,000 people there. And if you don't have 600,000 people at the levaya, then you have to, even if you're learning and you usually don't interrupt your learning, you have to interrupt your Talmud Torah in order to be there to accompany the person who passed away, the Torah scholar, to their resting place. Now, the Hani Mili, and again, the caveat which I've which we've been announcing from the beginning of the Gemara, but the Gemara gives a caveat now. Hani mili lemande kari v'tani. This would apply, meaning you have to have so many people, according to all these opinions, at a levaya, at a funeral of a Torah scholar, only somebody, kari, as he learned Mikra, learned Chumash, Tanakh, Tani, he learned Mishnayos to himself, but wasn't a teacher of others, just learned for himself. But someone who teaches others, and just like previously in the Gemara, we had an opinion which said masni, means somebody who learns Gemara, right? Are you allowed to have any usage, any service done by the person? So lamande masni, so either one who teaches to others, or one who learned the deeper sugyas, the deeper reasoning behind the halachas, the Gemaras. Leis leishura, there is no amount, no limit to how many people should be at his levaya, at his funeral, because such a person is deserving of any honor, and there's no limit to the amount of people that should be at their funeral. And someone who didn't learn at all, doesn't know anything, so then every Jewish person the whole Jewish nation is responsible to take care of them, to make sure they're buried. And you only, if there's no one to do it, it's called a mes mitzvah, no one to take care of them, then you have to take care of it, even if you're a Torah scholar. Otherwise, Torah scholars are exempt from doing it, and other people should be their representatives to help them. If you have a mes mitzvah, is either someone doesn't have anyone to take care of the burial, or also if there's no minyan at the funeral, no one, and to say Kaddish at the end of the funeral, so then you could also interrupt your Torah learning in order to go to help such a funeral. Now, every single Jew has mitzvahs. Every single Jew, as the Rebbe says, many times, probably not 600,000, but many times, in the thousands, right? So every single Jew definitely thought of thoughts of teshuvah in their life at least several times. And Gemara says if someone marries somebody on condition that I am a complete tzaddik, it's a valid marriage because a condition is met, because perhaps he had thoughts of teshuvah in his life. So every single Jew is a tzaddik in every sense of the word. Amechum tzaddikim. So we don't see, even by great Talmidei Chacham, great Torah scholars, you don't see these numbers unless tremendous people, 12,000, 600,000, you don't see these numbers. And even by many Talmidei Chacham Torah scholars, the minhag is, in most places, that usually gather together either in a funeral home or by a shul, outside of a shul, and everyone accompanies them. And they don't go to the burial place. So what is the reason for this, of our minhagim today? And it's not such a simple thing, in truth. It is a little bit, it's a little bit nuanced. Even Moshe Feinstein was asked this question. And he says, how come we don't go to every single funeral, every levaya of everyone who learned Torah? And he says, I don't know the real reason. He says, I'm trying to figure, I don't know the reason myself. He says, perhaps it means only somebody who's aware of the dead person who passed away, only somebody who saw the person who passed away. He himself said, I'm not exactly sure the entire reason. The Minchas Elazar, the Munkatcher Rebbe, Munkatcher Rav, right, passed away in the 1930s. Tremendous Talmid Chacham, tremendous Torah scholar. He says in large cities where unfortunately every day you have many funerals, and Baruch Hashem, you have every day many weddings. Mm-hmm. And in a large city, especially a city with nowadays where at least entire for probably in Eretz Yisrael too, but there's most people learned at least a little Chumash when they're younger. They learned or even if they heard the Torah reading in the shul or Shnai Mikra, according to some understandings, it's enough to be considered to be someone who is no longer a Am Aretz, become a Torah, a Talmid Chacham. You have to, so such a person, you have to accompany their funeral? And if so, no one's going to ever have time to learn, because you have to be at every levaya. So Rebbe Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, he had a discussion with Moshe Feinstein about this. He couldn't, and Moshe Feinstein didn't have any reason why we don't do it. The Shlomo Zalman Auerbach himself, he says a reason why we don't have to go to every funeral and every wedding is because there's no set time for levayas or funerals. There's no set time for weddings. If there was a rule, let's say in New York City, that every single funeral has to be at 10 a.m., so then at 10 a.m. there's going to be levaya, then you should show up. If there's a rule that every single chuppah has to be at exactly 6 p.m., at 6 p.m. you would have to show up. But there is no set time. One person does it early in the morning, one person does it late in the afternoon. So since you could say that there's no set time, you don't know the exact time when it's going to be, so Allah Safek, if you have a doubt, you don't have to interrupt your Torah learning. That's what the Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says, why we don't, no reason perhaps why we don't have to go to every levaya and every chuppah that goes on. The Rush also writes that it doesn't only apply to a Talmid Chacham, a Torah scholar, it would apply also to the wife of a Torah scholar. Because although she not necessarily learned Gemara and learned the big depth as her husband learned, but only in her merit was her husband able to sit and learn Torah, and her children could learn Torah. So even the wife of a Torah scholar, a person would have to interrupt the Torah learning in order to go to the levaya. So all this is called a Talmid Chacham. In the case of what about a mes mitzvah? Mes mitzvah is someone who passes away and there's no one to take care of them. Either they're found dead on the road, they don't know who they are. Either they have no children and there's no one to take care of them. Either their family does not want to take care of them in a Torah way, in a halachic way. It's called a mes mitzvah. We see that Rabbi Akiva himself, he went, he found the mes mitzvah. He was traveling to his Rebbe to learn Torah, and he found a mes mitzvah in front of Rabbi Shua and Rabbi Eliezer on the way. He found the mes mitzvah, and he took care of the mes mitzvah. And when they came to him and they told him that you were not supposed to interrupt your Torah learning to bury the mes mitzvah. So different reasons given for that. Some say either it says Rabbi Akiva carried the person on his shoulders for 4 miles until he buried them. He says a mes mitzvah. Rabbi Yeshua ben Nun said, everywhere in Eretz Yisrael you find the mes mitzvah, you bury them immediately in their spot, wherever they are. That was a condition. Eretz Yisrael was divided among the Shvatim. Or he should have been doing the mitzvah shimush Talmid Chacham, serving Torah scholars. And they told Rebbe Akiva, true, you were allowed to bring him to a cemetery, the person you found, but more important than bringing him to a cemetery would have been to be mishamish, to serve and to assist Torah scholars of Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Eliezer. Another interesting halacha is that whose Torah learning do we interrupt for these things? To go to the levaya of a Talmid Chacham, a Torah scholar? Us people, adults. Although I'm a child in comparison to most of you, but the adults are specifically the ones. Children are sitting and learning Torah, they're learning Chumash, learning Aleph Beis. You don't interrupt their limit Torah, their Torah learning. To go to a levaya, to go to a funeral, even to build a Beis HaMikdash, you don't interrupt. And that's the most important thing. More important than building the Beis HaMikdash, more important than having a shul, more important than having anything else, is to have children who are sitting and learning Torah. Halacha, is it an obligation? Is it just a good thing? So halacha is, for some reason, it's not so customary today, perhaps for all the reasons we said. But if it's a very big Talmid Chacham, very big Torah scholar, everyone must go to the levaya. And the idea of, we don't have nowadays someone who's considered to be Teirasim Minasai. The Torah is their only trade on the level of Rishim Bar Yochai and Rav Yehuda Bar Ilai. Those we don't really have anymore today. And therefore, it's a little bit more lenient when to interrupt your Torah learning in order to go to a levaya, to go to a funeral. So we'll pause over here. And Emir Hashem, on Monday, we're going to learn a very interesting Gemara, the importance of a shul, importance of there's differences, which shul is holier than the other shul, even in Babel, meaning where the Shekhinah is. And Emir Hashem, I hope that Rebbe Label will be able to give us some insight on the whole subject of the subject.
Came back from the Chassid at like about 4 o'clock in the morning, so I'm a bit tired.
Okay. We're holding, if you have the Mimer, page 177. I realize it's no longer on the screen because I made my mistake, close that tab. So, just try bring this up. Veyodaata Moskva. Mimer Veyodaata. It's over here. Share this one. Mimer Veyodaata Moskva. Well, should have the Hebrew on, but B'Rich Hashem, I guess next time we do this, next week, we'll have also the Hebrew. But for today, we'll have the English on. I'm middle of discussing the Mimer, how you have to look at the world through the lens of Hashem. How the nature of the world, even nature is a name of Hashem, is called Teva HaTeva. The name Elokim is a name of Hashem which creates the world. And that is just one of Hashem's tools that he uses, miracles that he does to have creation going on, to have existence continuing. The reason why we call it nature is because Hashem does it so consistently over and over and over that we think this is the way things are supposed to work. But it's not something that happens by itself. It's rather, it's something that Hashem constantly is doing over every moment. So when a person has any type of crisis, whether it's money, whether it's health, so there's 2 choices that you have. One is to start being afraid of it, stressing out. The other way is to believe in Hashem. And by knowing and demonstrating that everything is, the Elokim, everything you see is difficult, is Havaya. Is really the essence of Hashem. As is, the neshama already came down so far. It's already so difficult for the neshama to come down all the way to this physical world, because the neshama is a spiritual thing. So the more darkness we experience, the greater light of Hashem is a person is bringing down the light of their neshama all the way down to this person. So the Rebbe Hershel will now give 3 examples of people from earlier times, either the Avos, the Nevi'im, or the Tanaim. He gives 3 examples of people who, although they had very difficult tribulations and trials and hardships in their life, they managed to turn them around through their emunah, their belief in Hashem. They had no fear, and instead, when others saw difficulties, they saw Havaya. They saw only the infiniteness of Hashem. First one is going to be Avram Avinu. Second one is going to be Eliyahu Hanavi. Third one is going to be Reb Chanina ben Dosa. So Ukamaya, the Nisayin Avram Borkastim. When Avram Avinu, Avram was thrown into the, just find it on the page. Here. When Avram Avinu was challenged, he had a test. He believed in Hashem, and Nimrod, the king, wanted to kill him, and he threw him into a fiery furnace because he broke all the idols in his father Terach's house. Similarly, Avram Avinu had a larger test also when he brought his only son, who was born in his and Sarah's old age, who Hashem promised him, I'll make him into a great nation, and Hashem told him to bring him as a korban, as a sacrifice at the Akedas Yitzchak, the binding of Yitzchak. And both of these made no sense at all. If you ask a Rav, what should I do? They'll probably tell you, don't listen. Probably tell you, don't, try finding a way out of it. And Avram Avinu, with simcha, with joy and excitement, he went to the Akedas Yitzchak. So when Avram Avinu when Nimrod challenged Avram, says, do you believe in Hashem? Or you believe in me as a God, in idols? If you believe in Hashem, I'm going to throw you into this big fiery furnace. And Hashem, and he was thrown into the fiery furnace. And Avram Avinu didn't go into the fiery furnace knowing a miracle would happen. He went in mind having that he's going to be killed, that he will die. Avram Avinu would know that he's going to survive miraculously. There never would have been any test, no challenge involved. He thought that he's going to die and he'll be consumed by the fire, because the natural property of fire is that a person dies. Fire burns. So Avram Avinu was not impressed by this big burning fire. And to him, you could go to Avram Avinu and tell him, your mission is to spread Yiddishkeit in the world. Spread Hashem in the world. You're the first one. The whole future of the world, existence, is depending on you. You're going to let yourself be killed now? What's going to be with everything in the future? Avram Avinu didn't even think about that. All he saw was, this is what Hashem wants of me right now, and this is exactly what I'm going to be doing. And therefore, the nature of the world is fire. If Avram Avinu would have been going with a natural type of look, the fire would have burned him. But Avram Avinu went with the Neshemeli Havaya. Amnim Yedua. That Teva v'Gematria Lekim. The properties and the laws of nature are just a product of Hashem constantly giving it that nature. And Teva, nature, is Gematria, the numerical value of 86, HaTeva, which is the name of Elikim, which conceals godliness. Hainu shekol Hatzvi-Bais shebe'olam zeu rak me'levushim estadim l'shem Elikim. Everything which is covering over Hashem is merely a garment. It's a concealment of the name of Elokim on the name of Havaya V'Kivavke. There's a naser ribis chalkus v'agbala. Elokim, Yud Mem, makes it a plural, and it has many different interpretations of the same thing, of the light of Hashem, which is creating the world. The name Elokim has the nature in the world that fire burns and water puts out the fire. Fire's tendency is to be very warm and hot. The tendency of water is to be cold, and one puts out the other, and that's the way Hashem makes the world. And that's the way the name Elokim, Bereshis Bar Elokim, Elokim made creation. Al Mitzad Shem Havaya, but from the name of Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, the greater name of Hashem, which is not by the entire creation, rather the name Havaya only comes after creation is complete in the Torah. Shu Bechinas Bilti Gvul, and the name of Yud-Kei Vav-Kei is the name of Hashem, which is not limited. Ein Sham Bechinas Akbala V'Schalkus T'mayim V'Eish Klal. So it doesn't have any differences between fire and water. V'yachal, and it's possible Shamayim Lo Yechabe. It's possible that water won't put out a fire. Water will make a fire bigger. Ve'esh lo yisrif, and it's possible a fire won't burn. Ukumai, like a story of Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa. We mentioned him previously when it came to davening, they would always go to Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa to daven for rain. The story of Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa. He was very, very poor. And the entire week, all he ate, you know what he ate, his diet was? If you keep his diet, I guarantee you to lose weight. What was Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa's diet? Kav charuvin, a basket of charuvin, carobs.
Carobs, yeah.
That was his diet a whole week, from Shabbos to Shabbos. On Shabbos, he had maybe challah as well. So he was very, very poor. And he would get oil every single week. He would save up all the coins that he had. He would buy oil for to light Shabbos candles. So his daughter could light, his wife or his daughter, they could light candles in the house for Shabbos. And one Friday, his daughter set up the Shabbos candles at home, and she realized she made a big mistake. That instead of buying oil for the candles, she bought vinegar. And she started crying. She knows the whole entire week they save up every penny to buy oil, and now, by mistake, she bought vinegar. The vinegar, the Shabbos candles won't be able to be lit. Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa told her not to worry at all, because Misha Amar the same Hashem who tells oil to burn and be a fire will now tell vinegar to burn and be the fire. Hashem can command the oil to burn. Hashem can command the vinegar to burn. And he said not to worry and to light the Shabbos candles as usual. And that's what they did. And miraculously, the Shabbos candles burned. And not just that, instead of going out, as it usually does, sometime during the night, they stayed lit the entire Shabbos. So Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa, many stories of Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa, miraculous stories. When he wanted to give a gift to the Beis Hamikdash, and the angel showed up, and he told him to put one finger and helped him carry a humongous stone to the Beis Hamikdash. Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa was not impressed by the laws of nature. He was aware of the Dvar Havaya, Shem, which is behind the facade of nature at all times, and therefore he was never fazed by anything. And therefore, since he lived with Havaya, with Hashem's power of infinite light in his personal life, therefore, when it came time to of a test or a difficulty or any problem, he lived with that as well. And Hashem therefore allowed the vinegar to miraculously burn, and all the other stories that we have. Right, the goats of Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa, which were attacked by bears, and the bears were able to kill the goats with their horns and carry them back home, and all the other many miracles of Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa. All these things happened because Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa lived with the way of Havaya. And we're going to have another example of the Eliyahu Navi in a couple of lines, which that we'll do in Mirz Hashem next week. Tomorrow, Mirz Hashem, we will have one and only Rabbi Darren, and Mirz Hashem tomorrow 10:30 online.